I played every Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi game. Here's my thoughts. For starters, I'm saying it again, thank you all so much for all of the support. I love that people are enjoying my videos, and I've really enjoyed reading all of your comments. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing because it really helps me out. Also, let me know in the comments what kind of stuff you want to see. I've gotten tons of great suggestions already, and this video is actually one of them. So, not to be confused with Budokai, which I already made 2 videos on, Budokai Tenkaichi is a separate series of 3D arena fighting games that started back in 2005. That being said, there were a few games that didn't exactly have the name Tenkaichi, but were basically Tenkaichi. Then there were a couple of more that are only really technically Tenkaichi games, but I'll still mention them here. Alright, let's get into the games. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi released for the PlayStation 2 in 2005. This game's intro is super iconic to me. It's also got the weirdest art style. For some reason, they decided to slather every character in grease or something for just this opening. Either way, it is still a super cool segment, and it has a sick soundtrack to back it up. It really gets you hyped for the kind of game you're about to play. Well, except for this part, which never fails to make me laugh. Graphically, this game looks great. The art style is similar to Budokai 2 and onward, and for the most part the entire series sticks with this style going forward. Also, a nice touch I really enjoy is how characters get battle damaged in basically all of these games. Their outfits tear up and they look beat up if they take a lot of damage. Plus, a lot of the environments can get damaged and messed up from your fights, and this is a thing I really enjoy in pretty much all of these games. It's a neat immersion thing that I really like. The first 3 Tenkaichi games also have very colorful and interactive menus. Different characters talk to you in basically every menu, and there's always some kind of fun thing happening in the background. This is one of those things that I really like, but some people may not. It really depends on your tastes, but I really enjoy this kind of thing. Gameplay-wise, Tenkaichi is a pretty big departure from how Budokai worked. In this game, you're able to move around almost entirely freely on a pretty huge map. At the beginning of a match, you have to hold down L1 to scan the entire field so you can lock onto your enemy. There's a whole system here where different characters have different ranges they can lock on from, but I won't get into that too much here. Once you've locked on, you're able to dash toward them by holding X. If you hold down the key button and X, you can dash way faster, but it uses up your key. Using special abilities requires you to hold down L2 and press certain button combinations. Combos are really fast, and they can be chained together, causing enemies to be completely knocked away. You can also rush at them to keep hitting them when they're down. Also, there's these beam struggles if you and an enemy use an energy attack at the same time. To win, you have to spin the joystick faster than the enemy. The modes in Tenkaichi are Z Battle Gate, Ultimate Battle, World Tournament, Dueling, Practice, Evolution Z, and Character Illustrations. Z Battlegate is the game's story mode, and it's framed in such a way that you're experiencing the story through Shenron's memories. The story covers all the way through the Buu saga, and it also has a little bit of content from GT. Plus, there's some movie content like Janemba missions and Bojack missions mixed in. The game goes on a linear path where you go from mission to mission. Once you select the saga you want to play, you're then able to select whatever mission you want, either the newest one you've unlocked or the one you want to replay. At the beginning of the fights, there's a short cutscene, and honestly, these cutscenes are pretty bare bones, but at least they're voiced. Ultimate Battle Mode is a fun single-player kind of ranking mode. The way it works is that you start out with no ranking, and as you win fights, they become harder and harder, but you also gain more points and climb the ladder of 100 fighters. Winning fights in certain ways also increases your score, like having a perfect finish or beating the enemy with a super move. It's not as rewarding as playing against people online, but as a single-player thing, it's really ahead of its time. World Tournament Mode works exactly like it does in the Budokai games. You're able to choose your difficulty, and then you're put on a bracket where you fight to win the whole tournament. The announcer, as is tradition, narrates the entire thing, and I enjoy that greatly. Ring outs also return. Winning the tournament rewards you with an item. There's also an additional World Tournament mode called the Cell Games. The Cell Games take place in the Cell Games arena map and always end with a fight against Cell. Dueling mode is straightforward. Player versus CPU, player versus player, and CPU versus CPU. Evolution Z is Tenkaichi's version of the capsule editor from Budokai. In Tenkaichi, you unlock items called Z items over time, which you can equip to your characters. They're mostly just stat boosts, but some of them can also do things like increase your Z item capacity or increase the length of your max power state. Character Illustrations mode is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Well, kind of. It includes a render of every character along with a text profile. It's a nice addition, and I'm glad it's there. A couple of other things I forgot to mention. This game starts a fantastic trend of having character-specific dialogue, and I am here for it. This game also brings back the tradition of having a little mini-game on the loading screen. In this one, you mash buttons to make Gotenks blow out the ghosts faster. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi is an incredibly solid foundation for a great series of games. There's very little jank here, and I think that every game that came after it improved it in some way. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2006, with a Wii version coming out later. First off, I've gotta say that the number of characters in this game is bonkers. This game pretty much covered every Dragon Ball base for character representation. You can even play as Grandpa Gohan, if that's anything to go by. The visuals in this game are about the same as Tenkaichi 1, albeit a bit more refined. I guess the best way I can explain it is that the character models look a little bit cleaner and the shading, at least to me, looks a bit better. The gameplay has changed just a little bit, but mostly for the better. For starters, it feels a lot smoother to play in general. I don't know how to describe it, but there's just a better game feel. But for specific stuff, I'll go into some of the changes. For starters, you can now transform in battle. In the first Tenkaichi, the only way to use a Super Saiyan transformation was to pick it in the menu when you were selecting your character. In Tenkaichi 2, you can now transform in battle. There's also now a tag team mechanic for some of the battles where you can tag in characters to switch on the fly. If this was in the first Tenkaichi, I never saw it. Using some special abilities now allows you to charge them up to deal more damage. In the first Tenkaichi, using the ability was pretty much the same every time. Now you can kind of judge whether you want to press the button for a long time or just tap it for a quick attack. The modes in Tenkaichi 2 are Dragon Adventure, Ultimate Battle Z, Dragon Tournament, Dueling, Ultimate Training, Evolution Z, the Item Shop, and Dragon Library. Dragon Adventure is the story mode. It's broken down into sagas kind of like Tenkaichi 1. This time though, there's a whole map you can navigate, just like in Budokai 3. You're able to go anywhere on the map and there's plenty of landmarks to visit. When you do visit a landmark, you're able to explore a little bit and talk to NPCs. Sometimes there's little treasures lying around like bags of money for some reason. Occasionally the NPCs will also try to fight you too. Also at certain points in the story, other characters will join you in the free roaming parts, but they just kind of follow you. There's no extra gameplay thing to it. When you go to landmarks that progress the story, you usually get a cutscene along with some dialogue. The cutscenes are about the same as the last games really. They're serviceable, but that's really the most I can say about them. I do like how the announcer interjects all the time though. Completing fights rewards you with items, experience, and sometimes even new characters. The story mode in Tenkaichi 2 covers all the same stuff as the first game, so all the way through the Buu saga, plus a pretty good extra selection of side stories. Along with GT and movie content, there's even extra stuff like a confrontation with Videl and Broly. I do have one gripe with this story mode though. The navigation is kinda messy. When you're choosing the saga you want to play, it's fine when you're first going through them, but if you want to go back and replay them, you have to navigate through a lot of icons that look mostly the same. I'm probably the only person in the world that this annoys, but I still thought I'd mention it. Ultimate Battle Z is named similarly to the first game's Ultimate Battle mode, but this time it works completely differently. In this mode, you select from a series of courses. Every course has pillars, and it actually kind of gives me Mortal Kombat vibes. It's essentially this game's version of an arcade mode, and you can pick whichever course you want. They range from the Ginyu Force to movie villain battles. The battles are also a mixture of solo and tag battles, so it's got quite a bit of variety. Dueling mode is straightforward, but there is a cool little thing you can do in the battle settings. You can actually choose the announcer for the match. While it doesn't really affect anything outside of the voice, it's still super cool that you have the option. Beyond that, there's player versus computer, player versus player, and CPU versus CPU. Dragon Tournament includes 3 modes: World Tournament, Cell Games, and the World Martial Arts Big Tournament. World Tournament works exactly as you'd expect. You're out on a tournament ladder and you fight your way to the top. Cell Game works the same way, but you can fight Cell at the end if you're playing at a higher difficulty. The final one is the World Martial Arts Big Tournament. This one works the same as the other two, but Hercule is the host. I like this one because he gets progressively more nervous as you win more fights. Evolution Z is back from the first game and works pretty much the same. There's way more items you can equip this time around though, and there's also a separate item shop mode where you can buy and sell Z items. Dragon Library is this game's museum mode. There's 3 modes inside of Dragon Library too. Character Illustrations is the first one, and it gives you some backstory on the character and lets you look at their 3D model. Dragon Text is an overview of every saga in the game, and Sound Select lets you listen to all the music in the game. One thing I do want to note, if you're playing the PlayStation 2 version, having Tenkaichi 1 data actually gives you a bunch of Zenny. Unfortunately, the Wii version doesn't have a bonus like this, but I guess it's understandable considering the Wii didn't get the first game. Also, the little loading game is Yamcha using energy balls to break bricks. You flick the control stick in the direction you want to break them, but you can also hit Yamcha if you flick it down. Tenkaichi 2 isn't the biggest step up from the first game, but it is still definitely an improvement. It feels a lot better to play and the modes feel way more fleshed out all around. I honestly don't see any reason why I'd play 1 over 2 just because 2 pretty much does everything better. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 was released for the PlayStation 2 and Wii in 2007. Visually, this game looks very similar to Tenkaichi 2, though in my opinion the shading looks just a smidge better, but that also could just be my imagination. Gameplay-wise, this one made a few changes. There's a few new fighting mechanics, including some movement stuff and the ability to dash behind enemies for starters. They added some new time of day variations to some of the maps too. Also, the character select is a lot easier to navigate in my opinion, and the way it's sorted makes a lot more sense than Tenkaichi 2's, especially since this game has even more characters. The modes in Tenkaichi 3 are Dragon History, Ultimate Battle, Dragon World Tour, Duel, Dragon Net Battle, Evolution Z, and Ultimate Training. As you probably guessed, Dragon History is the story mode. In this one, you actually choose your difficulty before you start playing, whereas previous games had a difficulty selection for each battle. I think this is a lot more streamlined, to be honest, because there's less menu things to flick through. The story in this one is told mainly through text, as is typical for these games. There are minor cutscenes before the battles, but that's pretty much the same as previous games. However, they definitely amped up the presentation here. During the battles, the characters actually talk to each other, and there's tons of dialogue happening all the time. The battles are also sometimes broken up by entire cutscenes with even more dialogue. I like this approach, at least for the story mode. It makes it feel more like a story mode and less like an arcade mode with dialogue. When you complete fights, you unlock more story missions. Also, the free roaming aspect is totally gone, which is good or bad depending on if you liked that part of Tenkaichi 2. I personally didn't mind that mode, but it being gone doesn't really upset me or anything. The story in Tenkaichi 3 covers pretty much the same content as the previous Tenkaichi games, but overall there isn't as much story content as Tenkaichi 2. I'm totally fine with that though, since the presentation is so much better. I think the story mode in Tenkaichi 3 actually has the best layout for story selection. Every saga has its own art, and it's actually really easy to navigate. I also really like how each saga has their own character attached to it that talks to you, and the character has something to say about each mission you scroll over. To be honest, Tenkaichi 3's story mode is probably my favorite so far. It definitely has less content overall, but the content that's there is better. Ultimate Battle Mode has 3 modes inside of it: Sim Dragon, Mission 100, and Survival Mode. Sim Dragon Mode is pretty unique. It's got this kind of simulation training theme to it. The basic idea is that you have 10 days to train before a big battle. You select which option you want to use, which consumes your health and also sometimes consumes a day depending on the option you've picked. You can either choose to train or to explore. Training just gives you a general stat boost. Exploring can lead to little scenarios where you either run into an NPC or you have to make a decision, and even sometimes play a little minigame. Sometimes it seems like exploring doesn't really do anything but weaken you though, but also there's sometimes where you get stuff like stat boosts. The idea is to kind of juggle it to keep your HP high while also increasing your stats as much as possible. At the end of the 10 days, you fight an enemy. Winning the fight allows you to continue for another 10 days and so on to further increase your stats. While I'm not a huge fan of this mode, I am happy it exists, and I think it adds some nice variety and role-playing elements to an already pretty varied fighting game. Mission 100 is kind of like Ultimate Battle Z from Tenkaichi 2. You have a series of battles you can choose from, and they all have various themes. The difference here though is that a lot of them are survival type challenges where you're almost always outnumbered. I'm gonna be honest, this mode was brutally hard, at least for me. I could feel a gigantic difficulty spike playing this mode. Survival mode is the only mode here I didn't play because unlocking it requires you to complete a ton of Mission 100 fights, which I definitely could not do. In survival mode though, you choose a character and then fight against a slew of enemies for as long as you can hold out. Dragon World Tour is the World Tournament mode, but this time there's even more tournaments. There's also a presentation upgrade. A neat touch is that in the final round of the standard tournament, the stage switches to an evening version. Since I've talked about the World Tournaments in previous games and they work pretty much the same, I'll only talk about the new ones in Tenkaichi 3. Otherworld Tournament is a tournament set in, well, the other world. Outside of the presentation, it works pretty much the same as the other tournaments. The final tournament is called Yamcha Tournament. In this mode, the character you play as is completely random. It's actually a pretty neat challenge, especially considering it also chooses which form and custom slot you're stuck with. I somehow lucked out and got Super Saiyan 3 Goku my first time around. I didn't get so lucky the second time around. Duel mode is, say it with me, straightforward. Pretty much identical to Tenkaichi 2's, but there is an extra mode called DP Battle. Every character is assigned a certain destruction point or DP value, and you can choose a max value for both teams. Stronger characters have more DP points, meaning that you can have fewer stronger characters on your team. It's kind of a nice spin on the standard versus mode. Evolution Z works pretty much the same as previous games, but with a couple of additions like distributing points to your characters. The item shop is also nested inside of the mode this time. Character reference is the museum mode, and it's super similar to Tenkaichi 2's. However, this time, Chi-Chi has voice lines about every single character in the game, and it's actually really cool. I like how it's something a lot of people would never even notice or touch, but they still went out of their way to make all of these voice lines anyways. There's technically an extra mode in this game, but it only appears when you've collected all the Dragon Balls. It's, as you probably guessed, a mode where you summon Shenron to get new characters and Z items. Also, this game has multiple loading screen minigames. The first one is mashing a button to get Vegeta to do one-armed push-ups. The second one is mashing to get Gohan to pull out as many swords as possible. And the last one is mashing to get Goku to eat as many bowls of food as possible. They're not complicated or anything, but it's really nice to have a variety this time around. One last thing I'll note about Tenkaichi 3. The Wii version did have an online mode, but even if I wanted to play it, online play for the Wii has been long dead. Tenkaichi 3, as is tradition, is an improvement to Tenkaichi 2, which is an improvement to Tenkaichi 1. I would definitely recommend Tenkaichi 3 if you were to only play one of these games. I especially like the changes to the story mode, and while it didn't have as much content, the content that's there is way more entertaining, at least to me. So, the games I've covered so far are what I'd call the core Tenkaichi series. They're pretty much the foundation for what we see in the rest of the Tenkaichi games, though future games aren't really titled as Tenkaichi. That being said, this is the end of part 1. Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Also, let me know what you want to see me play next. I've got a pretty big backlog from all your suggestions, but I'm still always open to ideas. As always, thank you so much, and have a fantastic day.